What is up, guys? I got the winner of the chain guide. That is going to be going to B-Mountain Bike, that subscriber. So hit me up. You got a awesome brand new one-up chain guide coming your way free of charge. The two helmets are going to be picked in about a week and a half. So once again, if you're not already subscribed, make sure to do that and you will be entered to win the raffle for the helmet. Once again, B-Mountain Bike, you are the winner for the chain guide. Anyways, thanks for your patience. On to the video. Downhill World Cup racers have been given the keys to the kingdom. That's what today's video is about. A, I'm going to explain what it is I'm even referring to, B, how it happened, and C, most importantly, why that is fantastic for me and you as fans and riders of these downhill bikes. So it's funny, when I was researching for the video that I just did about the 2015 Specialized demo, I happened to stumble across a comment from none other than Aaron Gwin that really strikes at the heart of what I am talking about. And he mentioned kind of in passing that the first time that he actually got to ride the new 27.5 demo was when it was pretty much at its final production phase. Now, for many of you listening, you're probably wondering, what's the big deal? What's the significance? Well, if we take a second and actually think about what that means, Aaron Gwin, one of the greatest riders of all time, the racer on Specialized, and the rider that was going to be racing that exact bike, had very little or no input in the actual development of the new bike. Now, as strange as that sounds, that was, believe it or not, the norm. That was pretty much standard operating procedure up until really a few years ago. And the World Cup racers oftentimes had a lot less input in the production version of the downhill bike than you would think. And this example with Aaron Gwin and the demo is kind of a great synopsis of what would typically happen. Since a downhill bike is typically a low volume product for these manufacturers, they want to streamline the process as much as possible. The simplest way to do it is to design the production bike in-house, pretty much do the majority of the testing, the R&D within the company, send that out the door, and then take that bike, send it to the race team, and allow them to give them feedback in terms of what changes, if any, they want to make. They will then go ahead and make those changes for the racers. And this was very common for literally decades up until a few years ago. And this is the silver lining in this story, is that today that approach is a lot less common. And I believe we have G, Dan, and Rachel Atherton to thank. Their bike company, Atherton Bikes, was kind of the start of what I was referring to as the riders now have the keys to the kingdom. They were no longer playing some small, trivial role in bike design. They were the company themselves. They could decide what changes to make, how to make it. The riders were now their own boss. That is really one of the first things that created this change in the industry, in the sport. We don't have to look any farther than Pivot, Frameworks, and Norco as more examples of this sort of rider-focused approach. Pivot, probably one of the best examples of this. Bernard Kerr was front and center in influencing the new Pivot downhill bike. It was probably a year and a half of testing, refining, experimenting on the Pivot factory team. There's a bunch of good riders there, Ed Masters, Jenna Hastings, but Bernard Kerr is definitely kind of the captain and owner. Now, an important distinction is I'm not suggesting that Bernard or G. Atherton or any of these riders and racers are in the room sort of working on the CAD software engineering side. Well, actually Nico Mullally was, in fact, but him being the exception, what I mean is they are sort of on the riding and testing side, providing the feedback to the engineers as to what direction to go. Pivot is a great example of a company and a owner, Chris Kokolis, saying, Bernard Kerr, you know better than I. We're going to have our engineers work on the idea. We're going to then give it to you, and you are going to tell us what changes to make. And now that bike that you can buy was designed in conjunction with the engineers by Bernard Kerr. And that is, A, is incredibly cool. B, means that bike is probably absolutely phenomenal. I myself have not ridden it, but again, it just speaks to the change in industry dynamics, these riders are no longer playing trivial, insignificant parts in bike design. They are really taking the reins in shaping, influencing, and developing what bikes we are able to buy. And that is why, or one of the reasons why bikes are so good. Frameworks is another fantastic example of a rider that is actually the company owner himself. Obviously, he can do whatever he wants, whenever he wants, in that Frameworks, and the success that they have seen is largely attributable to none other than Nico Mullally. I still remember when he decided to do that, how surprising and kind of risky it seemed, but I believe not only is it amazing that he's accomplished what he's accomplished, but he has continued to sort of build momentum into the industry in the change that continues to see riders play a larger and larger role in bike design. Norco is another fantastic example of a company that is really using Greg Minnaar, the GOAT of the sport, also one of just the smartest riders, in shaping that downhill bike. Now, it's not currently available to buy, but I can imagine that when it does eventually hit the shelves and we can purchase it, it's going to be incredible. This is one of the big reasons why bikes are so much better. But again, this was not the case 10 years ago and really for decades previous to that. It's one of the reasons why the sport is so exciting now. There's enough money coming into the sport that it makes financial sense to provide the riders and teams enough leeway to do it, to experiment, to take a few years to develop a bike. Intense is another fantastic example. When you buy that Intense downhill bike, you are buying a bike that was crafted from the ground up with Aaron Gwin, Dakota Norton, and the Intense engineers, Jeff Stiver. I can never pronounce his name correctly, but how cool is that? Like, you're not getting kind of a hodgepodge of, the racers had a little bit of influence. No, you're getting a bike that is literally from day one was designed in conjunction with the race team and the racers. That's one of the reasons bikes are so good. Yeah, the equipment has improved, suspension, brakes, tire technology, but this is really kind of the secret sauce as to why the bikes that me and you can buy are so phenomenal. So that was a long rant, but I think it's interesting. I want to hear your guys' opinion. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you have more examples of this? It's really interesting seeing industry changes and being a part of a sport long enough to look back and remember how different things were. Hope you enjoyed the video, and yeah,